harmed in here because it's a drawing. But what they don't realize is that possessing, no matter if it's AI,
yeah,
it is
dive in the like in the and your heart too. Is that's legal?
I if you're a little too
mods, all of them. To like Hassan's Hamas Pikers fan, the mods.
Okay.
no.
Okay.
Someone else.
Now let me frame this whole thing for everybody. Okay, I got notes everywhere. Bear with me. So I think the way I see this is you can listen to the takes they give, okay? You can argue the validity. You can argue one state, two state. You can do all that. And that's what most people are going to do when they watch this, okay? However, we're going to look at this a little differently. When I watch something like this, somehow my brain works differently. Not only do I hear the conversation, but somehow my brain is separating off what each of them are saying absent of the interactions they're having. So you have like the regular communication that you're seeing, the words, the interaction, all that. But my brain is also separating them and taking them out of this required chronological order. So I'm taking the totality of their argument that I hear over the time period, and I'm going to give that back to you. That way we're not looking at the small details of the statements. We're going to look at what each of them is doing during this conversation. I believe all three of them are weaponizing anti-Semitism. I think there's three different motivations, and it's interesting to be able to see all three of them at one time. So, as an overview, we'll start with IRI. I think IRI is being completely authentic here. I think IRI is being completely authentic here. We'll look at what I think his motivations are, how the things he says, a lot of people on the left will assign something to him that he's not saying, and they will give no empathy for the reality of his reasoning for what he believes. We'll get into Brianna, who is not doing this. Brianna is not doing which top left? This top left or this top left? Because they kind of look like the same person, but Brianna is not making an honest argument. You can't say the other top left, dude. She is not only not a good faith actor, because nobody but IRI in this conversation is a good faith actor. Now, I'm going to preface, again, I'm not stating facts. Adam, okay. I'm not stating facts. I'm stating my interpretation of what I see. The Brianna Wu is a selfish, craven political operative who I believe it'll be obvious as we go through this, is using any suffering of anybody, any dead body she can, for her own political desires. That could be intentional, like Queen Bee asked, is this, it could just be that's her personality and she can't help it. You know, like, I've got BPD, and had it not been for all the extensive therapy I went through and still go through, there's patterns I fell into that were very destructive. And I can't tell if she's opportunistic or very well planned, but there's more to her than she puts on the surface. Remember, she sponsored Wix streams. Why do you sponsor streams like that? Why do you keep going on these podcasts? People write her off and say, well, it's because she wants to be famous or she wants attention. Sure, but I see what she's doing as a way of building distribution numbers. So when we used to buy ads in the newspaper, right? The amount of ad is based on the circulation. So the number of eyeballs that saw the paper. Same with ads on TV, the number of eyeballs that are going to see it. I think that's her political currency to bring money in from donors to her PAC, is her ability to get on streams and get in front of people. That's why she's throwing money around. That's why she's got back channels. Now, Adam and Stitch, Lilo and Snitch. What is this? I saw him.
If you lose,
No, I saw him on the news earlier, and he wasn't doing the wrong thing. He was fighting the bully. He was standing up for the little guy fighting the bully. What a piece of shit. So, Adam and Sitch, Lilo and Stitch. How do I say this? I don't know if they're like black pill far right. I don't know if they're playing to an audience that pays. I don't know if these are I don't know, okay? I don't know their motivation. But their entire intent of this conversation is basically what Steven Crowder does, which is try to defend white supremacy, defend white people, try to make it that white people are being attacked and oppressed, that minority groups claiming oppression is really just a symptom of left-wing propaganda telling people the system is broken and you can't make it. It's all straw man, regurgitated right-wing talking points. Now, what you'll notice I've gone through an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes. Brianna, Lilo, and Snitch never address anti-Semitism, never address who's being anti-Semitic, never address what the anti-Semitic stuff is. Because they're using anti-Semitism as a weapon. IRI does weaponize anti-Semitism, but it's from an authentic place, and I don't think he means any harm. And I think the way he's weaponizing it is weaponized by most everybody else also. So let's dig into this. I'm going to try to use my notes the best I can to try to do this in the way that'll make most sense. Instead of just listening to the conversation, I'm going to give you the justifications for the shit I just said. All right? So, 25, 30.
Going to be like, yeah. I mean, I don't know what there is to say.
I see where Adam's going. He's going to be like, this stuff's been present. You guys just haven't seen it. That kind of thing. Is that what's going on?
Maybe taking 3v1 against IRA.
Well, no, we'll see. I mean, listen, this is the first time I find myself criticizing not only people on the left. I'm shocked by the anti-Semitism. They're couching it, hiding behind anti-Zionism.
Well, here, I don't want to assign. I took painstaking effort to say, I don't know if it's intentional. I'm not calling them racist. I'm saying the things they're saying do this. Be a person who could come from whatever propaganda, 100% pro-Israel in this situation. Yeah, agreed. Yes, I can.
And that's what got me to step into this. And I stayed out of this for a couple weeks because I'm like, no one's going to like my takes. My family is from kibbutzes, right near the ones that were attacked. My opinion is very biased. It's not going to go over well. So I just kind of keep it to myself. But once I start seeing Hassan and others attacking Zionists, ones that were attacked, my opinion is very biased. It's not going to go over well. So I just kind of keep it to myself. But once I start seeing Hassan and others attacking Zionism, that pissed me off because you might as well say Jewish people, because what are you hiding behind Zionism? They don't know what any of that shit means.
Okay, when someone says Zionism, you're in for a really shitty conversation.
Right.
It's going to get kind of racist really quickly.
What did I get distracted? Did he say the kibbutz line? Let me play it again.
It's very biased. It's not going to go over well. So no one's going to like my takes. My family is from kibbutzes, right near the ones that were attacked. My opinion is very biased. It's not going to go over well. So I just kind of keep it to myself. But once I start seeing Hassan and others attacking Zionism, that pissed me off because you might as well say Jewish people, because what are you hiding behind Zionism? They don't know what any of that shit means.
Okay, when someone says,
I just totally disagree. I think that is too broad of a brush. It's too broad of a brush. I think it's fair for IRI to say, this is my take. This is how I feel. And so I'm just assigning that. I'm not assigning he's saying everybody that says Zionism is this. I'm assigning he's saying, from my perspective, this is what I feel.
Zionism, you're in for.
Now, I believe IRI is genuine. But I'm speaking from already seeing this. I 100% refuse to believe Brianna is genuine in any way. She is the prototypical yes and Mr. Me Too, this whole conversation. Here's the thing, Ponder, it's not ignorance. Here's the thing. And I think he might say this in a little bit, but there is a nuance to the situation that I can't think of another scenario that I know well. I'm sure it happens, but there are two groups. One has a power dynamic over the other. But in these two groups, nobody is more than 2 generations away from trauma. I was born in 75. My parents were born in 48. So I'm 2 generations from people that were involved in World War II. So I understand myself the idea of somebody that that if you can't put yourself in the shoes of somebody that sees Israel as a safe place for Jews, and that's the way they see it, whether they're right or wrong, that's the way they see it. Now, you've got a lot of nature-based factors of this, his upbringing, his family, his experience. You can't deny any of that. You can't deny the fear that if Israel goes away, that the Jews get exterminated. You can't say he doesn't have a right, or you can't even understand the possibility of how somebody like him could feel without Israel. You have the extermination of the Jews, which ironically, the evangelicals support Israel for the extermination of the Jews. It's not a GoPro, it's a Prague Pro. So I'm not saying his take is right. Again, none of this is to evaluate their takes. That's somebody else's job. I'm showing you what's happening in the conversation. I'm explaining to you how he can feel the way that he feels. Agree with him or don't agree with him, you can come about this position authentically.
For a really shitty conversation.
Right.
It's going to get kind of racist really quick.
People, Hassan, other people who say they're not anti-Semitic, because I hear this very often. It's not people, Hassan, other people who say they're not anti-Semitic.
Well, I think that they don't have an understanding of what Zionism is, and not that I'm an expert, but for me, Zionism is just the Jewish people having a state. It's not the exclusion of other people. It doesn't mean the destruction of other people.
Bombaclat.
Are there extremist elements within Zionism? Of course. Are there people who have hijacked it and done crazy things with it? Sure. But for me, Zionism has always been, when people attack Zionism, it's always a way to attack Jewish people. So that's where I start.
Mm-hmm. You have a take, Brianna?
No,
So, if you listen to what he just said, I don't think he's trying to run cover for anything. I mean, maybe, but I just don't get it. I'm not saying he is or he isn't. I'm just giving you what I think. I think this is an honest take.
Of other people. Are there extremist elements within Zionism?
That's
of course.
funny.
Are there people who have hijacked it and done crazy things with it? Sure. But for me, Zionism has always been, when people attack Zionism, it's always a way to attack Jewish people. So that's where I start.
I think this is a bias. I don't think it is a propaganda. But when you say always and everyone, these are like thought terminating. Speaking in absolutes it's never a good idea, ever.
Mm-hmm. You have a take, Brianna?
No, I and kind of changing, and I just think there's anti-productive.
Anti-Semitic things to you, IRA?
I mean, not the normal stuff, but calling me a Nazi, saying my family or genocide.
You can get a good look at a T-bone by sticking your head up a bull's ass. Wouldn't you rather take the butcher's word for it?
Insiders and things like that. But I mean, I can just feel it. I've dealt with anti-Semitism my whole life, and I can.
I disagree with a lot of the stuff, but I think he's coming from a good place. Just like I said about Chud, I see a lot of things that don't have to do with his content that say more about his character than his content.
You can just feel when people are what they not saying what they really anti-Semiters and
anti-productive.
So this is important that this is a panel about anti-Semitism. What's up, Power Girl? This is a panel about anti-Semitism. And listen to IRI's answer about anti-Semitism.
It's not just not anti-productive. It's anti-Semitic, I think.
Have people been saying explicitly, directly anti-Semitic things to you, IRI?
I mean, not the normal stuff, but call me.
No real direct anti-Semitism. Oh, really? So this is a panel about calling out left-wing anti-Semitism, but like no personal direct experience with it. Just like people calling me a Nazi because they're equating the encampment and genocide of Palestinians with the encampment and genocide of Jews.
Me a Nazi, saying my family are genociders and things like that. But I mean, I can just feel it. You know, I've dealt with anti-Semitism my whole life, and I can just feel when people are what they not saying what they really want to say and just being nasty. But you know what the anti-Semitism for me is what I'm not hearing, and that is that the Jewish people have a right to live here side by side in peace with everybody. It's the dismantling of Israel, a nation that's been there 75 years, and it's just this pipe dream that these people are selling to their fan base, and it's also a distance from the Holocaust that a lot of these young people.
Now, to foreshadow, when he's talking about anti-Semitism, do you hear what he said? Who he said?
A nation that's been there 75 years, and it's just this pipe dream that these people are selling to their fan base, and it's also a distance from
selling to their fan base
from the Holocaust that a lot of these young people have.
Okay, there. This is a part that a lot of people don't take into account.
There's 75 years, and it's just this pipe dream that these people are selling to their fan base, and it's also a distance from the Holocaust that a lot of these young people have, that they don't understand why Israel was founded in the first place.
Well, I agree that it's like this pipe dream, because I mean we watched a bunch of Hassan content on this, and to me it is an absurd pipe dream that there'd be a one state that's like a secular state, because my understanding is that no one either side really wants that. So it's kind of.
I keep forgetting I have an agenda.
Well, part of, I think, our position is that this oppressor-oppressed dynamic is the lens of wokeness, something that we've talked about, and you guys have probably talked about but been in favor of. So I'm curious, Mr. Important, do you think these people are calling you a Nazi because you're Jewish, or do you think they're calling you a Nazi because you're a colonizer, an oppressor?
Well, probably more the oppressor. They think that I support the genocide of the Palestinians, which I disagree with the premise in the first place. I don't think they're being genocided, but that's their view that I'm.
You can't judge a book by its cover, though. Again, I'm not worried about anybody's takes. Try as hard as you can. Stop judging the take. That's the distraction. Trying to worry about this argument, that argument. I'm not even going to engage in it. Try to just focus on what I'm trying to show you.
No better than Hitler and the Nazis trying to remove the Jews from the face of the earth. And so, you know, it's the nastiest of insults they can call a Jewish person a Nazi.
Yeah, but has this changed your opinion on like leftism or wokeism or socialism at all?
I haven't thought about it like in that in that regard. Like, oh, this is wokeism.
Well, look, the lens has been turned on you now. That's why we're asking.
Sure. No, but listen, here's the thing. These people have always hated me because I'm a liberal. I know you guys disagree with me taking that label, but
what do you
these
mean
people
we're liberals?
What do you mean we're liberals? Previously said most of our audience is to the right of us. That's bullshit. We're liberals. Okay, Jimmy Dore, settle down.
I know, but you say I'm not.
Okay, milquetoast fence sitter Tim Pool.
You say I'm a progressive.
Right.
So he's IRI's a lib. Adam, is that Adam or is that Lilo or Snitch? Lilo, fuck, what was I just saying?
Because I'm a liberal. I know you guys disagree.
Lilo says he's a liberal and calls IRI a progressive, which means he's just a righty dressing up in drag as a liberal.
Agree with me taking that label, but
what do you
these
mean
people
we're liberals?
I know, but you say I'm not. You say I'm a progressive.
Right. Okay.
So,
well, look,
but you
sounds like
had
you're taking steps towards being a liberal here, so I like that.
Well, I've always been. This has always been my position. So these people have always hated me. I was just nice, so they couldn't do it openly. Now they have a reason to hate me openly for my support.
You're a colonizer.
Well,
you know how Eminem basically played himself in 8 Mile? That's what IRI would do if he played a lib on television.
And you're white.
Here's what I think. I think a lot of these people are misguided. I think it comes down to distance from the Holocaust. A lot of these young people don't know about the Holocaust. They don't know why the Jewish people have Israel. And I do think there is this sort of black and white oppressor versus oppressee. I think TikTok plays a major role in this. People are not getting their news from watching TV or even lengthy YouTube videos. They are going on TikTok. And TikTok, what is China's goal with TikTok? It's in order to sow discord in the Western world. So I think a lot of these people are just being manipulated. And I don't know what the hell's going on in these college campuses, but, you know, I think it's a minority of the voices. I don't think it's a majority.
So I agree with that. I think you have 2 generations of Americans now that have no memory of any institution.
Shut up. Just shut up. Shut up. It's not your turn, bitch.
I don't think it should be surprising, holistic analysis of how to evaluate our actions in the world. But I think this is a wake-up call that we need to have far more sophisticated discussions.
Well, this is a purpose of ideology, though. Ideology is designed to simplify the world, to create.
Okay, yeah, I have those in the wrong place. Fuck. Did I do more for him? Okay, I think that's all I did on him because the rest of his stuff isn't about Israel, right? What up, Rumble? Typical. True, Natalie. Taco Bell's Mexican. Okay, so I think to sum up IRI's weaponization of anti-Semitism, I don't think it's intentional. I think it comes from a good place, but I think he's missing the fact that evangelicals, a lot of them are extremely anti-Semitic and extremely pro-Israel. They're pro-Israel for the purpose of rounding up the Jews and genociding them in Israel. I think to say being pro-Israel is tied directly to anti-Semitism completely lacks nuance and makes my life harder, because if I have my own opinion, he's labeling he's giving other people the permission to call me anti-Semitic because I don't agree with what he said. But I respect where he's coming from. I understand his point. but also with the lack of nuance, it makes my life more dangerous because it creates a binary when there shouldn't be a binary there. Both sides peaceful. I mean, that's the thing. Okay, so that's IRI. Now, let's get into Brianna Wu. That was the smallest section on our campus. And they're just talking like these people are just broken, right? Michael, you can have that opinion, but to create the binary you're creating is the issue. The whole reason I say what IRI is doing is weaponizing anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, and I don't want to walk through the whole equation, but I can. But from a good place, from an authentic place, his certainty of one versus the other takes away a discussion, creates a binary, which means if I don't agree with you, I disagree with you. And if I don't agree with you, not only do I disagree with you, I believe the opposite thing you're fighting against. And that makes communication break down.
In a stylized world where everybody is a oppressor.
Okay, so what up, Brian? Hey, bum 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 bum. Okay, let's get into Wu. Back to
always a way to attack Jewish people. So that's where I start.
It's like a Quentin Tarantino movie.
You have a take, Brianna?
No, I agree with that.
Now, this is Brianna's take on like anti-Semitism in the left.
It's not to say.
Oh, wait. I forgot my notes here. Hold on. We're using anti-Semitism for political and personal purposes. She's not coming from this authentically, I don't believe. Speaks for the Jews. Talks in terms of how the optics about Israel affects elections. Broadens it out to other grievances and then becomes the victim. So she never really talks about the actual effects of anti-Semitism. She says anti-Semitism, right? But then never talks about it.
Can't have a.
We're not doing our takes on Israel. I know it's tough. It's like watching Super Mario Brothers and not telling somebody where to jump. But this is more important than the individual nuance of the argument. Understanding the way people are arguing so that you can recognize where these arguments are coming from is more important than one state, two state right now. It's more important than was it Israel or Hamas that bombed the hospital. Those nuances aren't going to change a goddamn thing. What will matter is when we understand who's speaking from an actual conversation, who has an agenda and is weaponizing things, and who's nefarious.
Nuanced discussion on, or a more academic discussion on should Israel, like, what is the best solution for policy here? I want to admit, I found this to be very laughable, but there is an ongoing discussion about like a one-state solution where I suppose Israelis, like Joe Biden calls up Netanyahu and says, Bibi, time to dissolve, to wrap the whole thing up. And he goes and dismantles all the borders. And Palestinians just come in, and all the Jewish people that live in Israel that have memories memories of the Holocaust. And
I didn't mean to yell at you, Sick. I'm just really trying to get that point home. I know how hard it is not to engage in the arguments. So here's the thing. I agree that's what it sounds like. I just don't know if you're accurate. Like, I don't know if there's more than meets the eye here.
Moved to Israel to all the hopes of having a safe state of their own. They just go, oh, all right, that's fine. We'll deal with this. And
if you listen to what she says throughout what I'm showing you, and you think about Brianna Wu has the reason we watched all the history. All of her history is she's rarely authentic. She plays the victim. It always becomes about her. She makes it about her to raise her profile. And she has a political pack in which she's working directly with streamers and Cenk Uygur and Democrats. So is it only about her take? Or is everything she does repeating the same thing over and over, discussion after discussion, because she has a political agenda, not interested in the conversation?
Then everybody lives side by side and it's utopia. That's a discussion that seems to be going on. And I guess you can have that discussion, but don't tell me with a lot of this, there's not this undercurrent when they say, Zionists, they really want to say the Jews, or at least that's the impression I get. I mean, tell me if
she runs a progressive pack calling out the left for what she labels anti-Semitism, which is just not being vocally for Israel's right to do whatever they're doing. That's pretty wild, don't you think?
if I'm crazy.
Well, I know it's weird. I think there's a lot of people, especially in the Middle East, and when you see a lot of these protests, and when you see a lot of people, unfortunately, of Middle Eastern descent, in
Yes, 1.5 million followers, and it put me in that arena.
He did this to me, and it was not a good afternoon.
So what IRI just said was that he retweeted Hassan saying, this is fucking dumb. And then that got Hassan's panty in a bunch. And a lot of people came at him on social media. And, he doesn't really care. He trolls people back, but also, he don't give a fuck. So it's no big deal to him, is what he just got done saying. The Jewish guy with ties to Israel just got done saying the online hate he got was no big deal.
Put me in that arena.
He did this to me, and it was not a good afternoon, I will just say.
Mm-hmm.
So you got caught up in that as well, Brianna?
Yeah. Not related to what happened to ImReallyImportant, but just separately, he tried to basically shoehorn me and get me to say that Israel was an apartheid state, right? Which, look, my public position is out there. I've been very, very clear on this. I do not support Netanyahu. I think anyone that looks into, his leadership can see he's a pretty corrupt guy. I think he's fairly analogous to Bush too, in the fact that he's used terrorism to keep himself in power very cynically. I think.
Can you remember the thing she's talking about? Can you remember the topic? What was she talking about? She's talking about the online hate from Hassan about anti-Semitism, right? Is that what this was about?
I think anyone that looks into, his leadership can see he's a pretty corrupt guy. I think he's fairly analogous to Bush too, in the fact that he's used terrorism to keep himself in power very cynically. I think if you're noticing stories about him delivering suitcases of cash to Hamas, I think for any reasonable person, this raises questions of him perhaps enabling Hamas for a deliberate opposition. So, I don't support Netanyahu, but I do.
I don't support Netanyahu, but I do
also really not support anti-Semitism.
Right.
And let's
anti-Semitism
be really clear,
bad.
The left in discussing this has lapsed again and again and
right.
again.
Who's the left again?
Into the most anti-Semitic tropes that dehumanize, not Netanyahu, not Israeli foreign policy, which I don't support, but, American Jews that don't have anything to do with this.
Well,
thank you. Queen of the Jews. Gentile Queen of the Jews speaking for me. I'm really grateful.
Well, you go, Brian.
No, I agree with IRI, or should I call you Mr. Important? Either one.
She's not. She's a political operative. A craven political operative.
No, but I've got an equally hard question for you. I mean, I hear you. I hear what you're saying about ideology.
Everybody's a fucking expert. Must be fucking nice.
Like breaking things down to a simplistic point of view, and I
leave the American Jews out, right?
But when I see this situation, exactly like Mr. Important does, I see a confluence of a lot of different events. I see generations of Americans that are getting points of view that, let's be frank, have been underrepresented in media for most of my lifetime, like the plight of the Palestinians. I think we would all agree that.
So, here's a technique. Call it out, recognize it, so you have plausible deniability, then throw it away.
CNN and the New York Times, they tend to not really cover these things accurately. But y'all's reaction to this is, aha, more evidence that wokeism is bad, which to me.
So she's calling out what I'll cover with the Lilo and Stitch stuff.
Seems like kind of an equally simplistic analysis. I want to be really clear. I've been fighting with these people on Twitter for weeks now.
These people
am far more black-pilled on areas of my movement than I was 2 weeks ago. And like Adam, you've told me repeatedly that these are some dangerous people that need to be called out. And I agree with your assessment there. But I think you're concluding that the entire movement is broken or corrupt. And I think it's just too far in my assessment.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that we're trying to differentiate. I mean, I know a lot of people.
Okay. Very nuanced take, right? Very nuanced take.
Oh, it's cop to. I never said any of that criticism of me. This is an admission, and I think this.
Like the riots are the language. There you go.
So
the language of the oppressed.
I want this is an admission.
Can we just stop making fun of her, because all this death over there, it's really hard on her. I don't think you guys are thinking about what it's like for her.
And I think this is a fair criticism of me. I will completely cop to, I never said any of that garbage like, oh, it's great to go out and shoplift, or this doesn't matter. But when some of the BLM riots happened, I completely admit, I looked at that news, I saw it on my news feed, and I said, I'm just not going to get involved with this. I knew it was wrong, but I did not speak out about that, right?
The civil rights uprising of 2020 was about Brianna Wu.
And I think every single time on the left,
she's like an ongoing episode of Quantum Leap.
Choose to kind of look the other way when it makes a point for us. I think it's corrupting our culture and our political movement. I do worry that we're becoming less capable.
I'm so glad she's addressing anti-Semitism.
Of intellectual honesty and looking at our own side and
Wick put up a tweet saying he wants to hear from Jewish people about this. And I've already said to him, you don't have the fucking balls to talk to me to my face anymore. You just don't. I don't think Wu or Wick have the fucking balls to talk to me. If I was them, I wouldn't. I would apologize. I would say how I was wrong. I would see if we could squash it. But I wouldn't have the fucking stones to try to talk to me, like, on stream. Like, they would be fucking dumb. But Wick put that tweet up, and I was like, it'd be my pleasure. Not a fucking shot. No shot. He'll put the dude that he knows is going to fuck him up. No shot.
And holding our own side to the standards we expect of other people.
He's ducking me like Rocky was ducking Clubber Lane.
Struggle with this because we're
my
here
mouth
talking
is
about
so
this
dry.
Today, and there's
I'll be
a
right
story that
back.
just came out in Axios about Donald Trump going through and basically pre-approving people that would serve in his cabinet and basically enact revenge on political opponents, right? So the stakes on the other side, in my view, is literally democracy or fascism. So I think it's hard because sometimes I want to focus on the truly terrifying existential threat to our country that I see, but I also see like this culture on my own side of not speaking up when things are wrong. And I or I would probably both agree. Like my mentions have been a war zone for calling out the anti-Semitism on the left for weeks now. It's not pleasant to go through. I wish I did not have this kind of backlash, but I do think it's important that some part of what we advocate for is a leftism that's fundamentally honest.
You bring up an interesting point because I did see that article about the right. The problem I see is there's two
oh God, did anyone watch the reboot? No, I don't know what that is.
Ideologies in conflict here.
I don't think there's a shot you can get Wick to do it. I don't think he has enough embarrassment gene or machismo gene. I don't think he has either one of them. I mean, because it's a very simple conversation. You said this was anti-Semitic, and there's no other way to look at it. I see it a different way. You told me that I'm not properly speaking out for Jews like you are. So, am I the anti-Semitic one and you're the one standing up for me and I just don't know it? And then how about when you said I should be standing up for the rights of Nazis to have the free speech to march around my temple with a sign that says something like, work will set you free. And if they're allowed to open carry, do that. I should fight for their rights. But, somebody rips down a poster, obviously they're fucking anti-Semitic and there's no nuance. I ask you, what does the Nazi uniform mean? And you says it depends.
Ideology, and there's liberalism, individualism. Ideology.
No shot.
One is collectivism, collectivist by nature, and the other is individualist. And the right, exactly as you're saying, I mean, what allows them to...
You didn't need the sarcasm.
To say it's...
Okay. Sorry. Okay, so that was that one.
Yeah, I'm
bad. I mean, like, who wants to live like that?
Yeah.
Sure.
No, I'm not. Well, two things. First, IRI. I've been doing.
Okay, now this is a panel about calling the left out for its anti-Semitism.
A lot of efforts to sabotage me professionally. No, I'm not. Well, two things. First, IRI. I've been dealing with a lot of efforts to sabotage me professionally and backchain, like literally get me fired from some of my positions. Like I can take heat on Twitter, but people are trying to.
So you're calling out the left. You're calling them anti-Semitic. You're saying it's disgusting. You don't think that is like trying to take somebody's livelihood away? No.
This is the irony to me. Like,
I mean, the inability to see that she's constantly doing to others what she's claiming is being done unto her.
Literally trying to help Democrats win elections, play a...
Look, I'm just trying to use anti-Semitism to win elections.
You more than probably anyone else in this space understand. On the ground field work is hard. Leading canvassing efforts is hard. Fundraising is hard. And, this is what I spend at least 40 hours a week working on. And, I've got people that are trying to basically get me fired from them, which is tremendously frustrating. It's not the Twitter stuff that I care about. It's the attempts to destroy my character. Secondly, you're my friend, but I cannot excuse the shoplifting at all. I've looked into the psychology of this. I'm not convinced that it's usually to feed your family. I think a lot of people do it in the course of a moment because it's fun. I think we're seeing a scourge of work.
This is such a progressive take.
Excuse the shoplifting. My friend, but I cannot excuse the shoplifting at all. I've looked into the psychology of this. I'm not convinced that it's usually to feed your family. I think.
Now here's the backstory to this. There's Queen Bee in there. There's Real. I saw what's his name, McFist earlier. So Natalie, anything she has to. What happened was they asked the question. A lot of people on the left are glorifying shoplifting. And IRI's like, no, I don't agree with shoplifting. Also, I find it more important to look at why are people shoplifting? Like, what leads to, what are the conditions that lead to it? And Lilo and Snitch said, oh, so you are okay with shoplifting. It's like, no, I just said it's wrong, but why are they doing it? Oh, so you think there's a material conditions thing. We'll get into that.
A lot of people do it in the course of a moment because it's fun. I think we're seeing a scourge of organized crime. They exist to do smash mobs and go do these stores, and I think it's destructive to these communities. So, do I have compassion for the material conditions that could be adding to this? Of course, and that's a separate discussion. But I have no issue at all saying shoplifting is wrong. This organized crime
lock them up
that's going on with stealing things from stores is wrong, and we just do not need to enable it on the left because it's not hurting corporations, it's hurting communities.
Yeah, look, I'm.
If you unionize, it's really just going to hurt you.
I definitely don't support shoplifting in any way at all. It's just, it seems like a minor inconvenience for me compared to the bigger issue of why people would steal. And even, I agree with you that there are mobs of kids that are organized that are shoplifting and taking stuff, and there's even organized gangs and such. And perhaps some progressive DAs have gone too far with lessening the punishment for shoplifting, and that seems to be something that's being discussed in a serious capacity. So I'm
is clearly I really struggle with and just
should you be calling out the extremists on the left?
Well, just to be clear.
Now, this is important. She's been saying the left, right? Correct? But listen to her actual analysis of the situation.
And I'll let him answer. My statement was I really struggle with understanding what proportion is appropriate.
Sure.
Because I think 0 is clearly not appropriate. But on the other side, you're literally talking about fascism. And as a public figure who's trying to provide to build coalitions in the party, I struggle every day with what my role is with that.
Well, before you answer, because you're kind of framing this in a very interesting way, which I think is what everyone does, and it's kind of why these extremists don't get called out, is that unfortunately, like the way it seems like a lot of politics works is that if you're on the right, you'll point to the left-wing extremist and you'll say, hey, this is the entire left. And you'll try to use this broad brush to paint everyone on the left as the extremist. And then the inverse of that is true. If you're on the left, you point to the extremist on the right. You say, hey, everyone on the right is one of these, fascist extremists. You try to paint everyone like that. And so because that happens, it makes people on the left and the right gun shy to call out the extremists on their side because it just gets perceived as ammunition for the other side. We saw this a lot with Anna Kasparian, with her birthing person tweet, where like the number one complaint that I saw from people to the left wasn't necessarily her tweet. It was that, Ben Shapiro retweeted it. Like a right-wing person used this complaint as ammunition against my team. And so is there a way to like kind of call out people on your side without falling prey to this team playing attitude?
Well, I lean towards what Brianna said, where I feel the time's more valuable.
Okay.
Do you think people are teaching their daughters that there's, quote, no possible way to overcome, say, structural sexism?
Yes.
I think they do it. I think you're a bit guilty of this yourself. I think you kind of inadvertently teach people that.
I don't agree with that. I think it's something that is there. It's a background radiation in your life, but life
goes too far.
You have to keep going forward, and we all have to. Like there was a phrase to come out of this Hamas Palestine horror that was in the John Oliver clip. It's like we're all doomed to live together, which I think is pretty appropriate. Like we ultimately are all going to have to get along. From my point of view, respectfully, I see.
I don't understand what you're saying, Joseph.
A thought process with y'all that I think consistently dismisses what everyone else goes through. And I'm not going to tell you there's not excesses on my own side. There are, but like I think your calculus makes you think there's no problem at all, or it's overstated, or the best course of action is to shut up about it. And I just don't agree with that.
No, look, I do see people further right than us obviously making that argument. Like they want to make the argument that it doesn't exist. I'm not one of those people. I think it does exist.
Or that it should exist.
Oh,
I'm watching. Yeah, because it's important.
Yeah, exactly. Which is even worse. It's important that we know what the reality is, because if there is this structural sexism, and I'm just talking about sexism, but it could be racism or homophobia, any one of these things. If there is a certain amount that is insurmountable for the individual to overcome. And in our past, there was. Obviously, women weren't even allowed in certain universities or professions, okay? So that's an insurmountable hurdle for them to overcome.
It's all good.
It's important to know that. If you believe it's an insurmountable hurdle and it's not an insurmountable hurdle, you're doing yourself a complete disservice. Because if the hurdle is insurmountable, you're a fool to try and beat it. You should. The logical course of action is to hunker down and live with it. You want to respond?
I'd like to see you engage with my point, but I will engage with yours by saying, look, my own life, I've got a house, I've got a really nice car collection, I do very well for myself, I have a job I think matters, I'm in a good marriage, I feel like I was handed a pretty tough deck and I've made the most of it, right? So I don't think my own life has been insurmountable, and I would never say that to anyone else. I think one of the things I admire about Republicans, and one of the things that has really served me well in my career, is a good old sense of personal responsibility. That, look, I was handed a tough hand, but my destiny is in my own hands, and I've got to make the most of it and make the best decisions I can in any moment for that, right? So I don't think it's insurmountable. But I do, again, want to say, I see a pattern with both of you that I think you structurally downplay these systems, and I think your solution that you're consistently advocating is don't talk about it. Or look at how crazy the people are that are advocating for this. And
my position is, look, just to interrupt, my position is to assess the problem for what it is, not to downplay it, but to accurately assess it. So that's something completely different.
Well, I was just going to say, like, I obviously agree. We need to assess the problem, figure out what it is. I just saw, someone on Twitter posted there's massive meta-analysis that was even showing that, biases against women in hiring has basically dropped to zero, while biases for hiring men is basically just increased. Supposedly, now you can look at this. I don't know. I've said there's a massive meta-analysis of this, of like 80 studies or something. But my position on like how to quote fix the problem is that we need to be pushing for a liberalism version of the race blind, gender blind society where we say, okay, if you're a man or a woman, you can do whatever you want and be whatever you want, and your gender doesn't necessarily control you, and we shouldn't be advocating along the lines of gender or race. And I see like that used to be the left position broadly. And that right now I see, and this is kind of like the Hassan camp, this is the kind of pro-Palestine Hamas camp, is this moving away from the race, gender blind liberal attitude to the leftist attitude of that stuff doesn't work. Liberalism doesn't work. We all need to align along identity politics and, say, we need to do specific things to make everything better for women at the cost of the male oppressors. And that's where I see like the difference here.
I just figured I'd give you that little preview for that part. Okay, one last woo, woo, woo. Ready?
I'm right. You should not exist. You should shut up and give me power. That's not going to get us anywhere. And it's not a formula for anything but internet bickering, which is why, to bring the conversation back to IRI, I think this is why both of us spend so much of our efforts on public policy and winning elections. This is a way to look at these issues and garner political power and get specific policies passed. This is a much better use of everyone's energy. And this is what.
Right, guys. Bring this back to IRI and Judaism. We need to get some policy passed.
The conversation back to IRI, I think this is why both of us spend so much of our efforts on public policy and winning elections. This is a way to look at these issues and garner political power and get specific policies passed. This is a much better use of everyone's energy, and this is what is my professional goal.
Yeah, no, and I understand that, and we, me and Adam, obviously have different. We're interested in different things. We're more interested in like.
Okay, so hopefully I proved my point. I think I proved my point. She doesn't give two shits about anti-Semitism. Her entire effort of calling out anti-Semitism is the phrase, we have to call out anti-Semitism on the left. That was it. All the rest of it is, we need to be this way because of policy. We need to act this way because of policy. Also, I'm the real victim of this situation. Feel bad for me. This is about me. Everything is about me. Now, our third and final contestant, right? We've got Lilo and Snitch. Now, I'm not saying they're racist. I'm not saying they're white supremacists. I have no reason to believe that they are. But the ideology that they are pushing here is of that. That is the ideology that they're supporting. So, use anti-Semitism to demonize the left and protect the right. Never discuss the anti-Semitism part. They go into the oppressed and the oppressor, mad that they can't say racist shit, and then stop others' free speech. Hassan is dangerous and must be stopped. Wokeism, leftism has always been a problem. That is their takes on anti-Semitism. Weird that this panel about anti-Semitism, no, other than mentioning anti-Semitism, IRI explained what it was to him and how he sees it, and his dealing with Hassan. these other people don't give two shits about anti-Semitism. Brianna Wu will tell you all about her American Jewish friends and how they feel and their generational trauma and their shit. But she doesn't have any interest in talking to somebody like me, who she calls anti-Semitic. So let's look at Lilo and Snitch here. Let's start here.
Zionists, they really want to say the Jews, or at least that's the impression I got. I mean, tell me if I'm crazy.
Well, I know it's weird. Like, I think there's a lot of people, especially like in the Middle East, when you see a lot of these protests, and when you see a lot of people, unfortunately, of Middle Eastern descent, like in Australia, saying gas the Jews. I mean, obviously, that's very anti-Semitic.
That's fun. That's obviously too bad.
Of Middle Eastern descent, like in Australia, saying gas the Jews. I mean, obviously, that's very anti-Semitic thought process there. And so I definitely think, from a global perspective, anti-Semitism definitely has a huge role in people not liking Israel.
Yeah.
But I think from a lot of the leftist American perspective, and even the leftist Canadian perspective, I don't know if it's so much anti-Semitism, if it's just this kind of lens, that what I would call brain rot lens, of looking at the world through the oppressor lens, and saying like, they think, in their mind, Israelis are white Europeans, which is not true, but that's how they perceive it.
You're going to notice a theme. Nobody else is bringing up race, talking about race, but these people who say the left care so much about race seem to bring up race a lot.
But Israelis are white Europeans who came to a region of non-white people and colonized them, and I think that's how they view it, and that's why they have such a dumb take on it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. I do.
In improv, you say yes and. Brianna, I completely agree with that. It's like an instinct. She doesn't even agree. I just completely agree with that.
Just for balance, want to say, my good friend Dean Obadala, who is a former Saturday Night Live writer, he has a show over on Sirius XM, really great guy, and he's Palestinian, he has family that grew up there, and I was on his show last night, and he's talking with displaced people. He actually had his hostile Israeli foreign policy year after year, and Dean is not anti-Semitic. He has condemned that regularly on the show for years. Water and electricity, and he's coming at this in good faith. And I do think that is a foreign policy that is eminently fair to criticize. Where I really have to say this is not appropriate is when people on my own side are really just frankly being anti-Semitic to people like IRI, right?
IRI says, I didn't really get any direct anti-Semitism, but also But also it's anti-Semitism that I have to call out. That like IRI, but he's not really getting IRI. So they're framing everything as the left only ever cares about oppressor and oppressed. And all of this, Israel, the way people feel about it, the anti-Semitism, it's all really just the mind rot of the bots on the left who all they think about is CRT every day. That's the argument we're getting here, okay? Now let them detail it more.
But I understand that.
Now I will say, Snitch does give a good definition of what anti-Semitism is. He says, I don't necessarily think that not liking Israel or having an issue with Israel is anti-Semitic. So he actually names it and then ignores that he explained anti-Semitism to go back to oppressor oppressed.
This is all like highly hypothetical.
I don't know, man. Jews get shit on wherever they go, so I'm not very confident that like democratizing and like being secular is going to help them,
Just to bring it back to the lens. So part of, I think, our position is that this oppressor-oppressed dynamic is the lens of wokeness, something that we've talked about, and you guys have probably talked about but been in favor of. So I'm curious.
So they jump on anything they can use to say, look, here, we were right. We were right. This ideology you have is harmful. We were right.
Mr. Important, do you think these people are calling you a Nazi because you're Jewish, or do you think they're calling you a Nazi because you're a colonizer, an oppressor?
Well, I'm probably more the oppressor. They think that I support the genocide of the Palestinians, which I disagree with the premise in the first place. I don't think they're being genocided, but that's their view, that I'm no better than Hitler and the Nazis trying to remove the Jews from the face of the earth. And so, it's the nastiest of insults they can call a Jewish person a Nazi.
Yeah, but has this changed your opinion on like leftism or wokeism or socialism at all?
I haven't thought about it like in that regard. Like, oh, this is
stuff like what you
the righties out there, but you have to admit it's mostly the left. Again, what got me into it, maybe it's personal and, maybe I'm waking up or something, but it doesn't change my opinion on the left or Biden or Democrats or woke culture or whatever. It doesn't change my opinion on any of that other stuff. It's just this one thing I feel is people falling victim to anti-Semitism without realizing it. I mean, there's been a lot of anti-Semitism out there coming from the right, no offense to the righties out there, but you have to admit it's mostly been coming from those types. And I think that bleeds over a lot to people and they don't even realize it. And they take on a lot of this. It's kind of like in 2016 with the attacks on Hillary by the right, that bled over to the left and affected some of the Bernie people too. So that's kind of what I'm seeing, if that makes sense.
Well, you go, Brian.
No, I agree with IRI, or should I call you Mr. Important? Either one. No, but I've got an equally hard question for you. I mean, I hear you. I hear what you're saying about ideology, like breaking things down to a simplistic point of view, and I agree with you. But when I see this situation, exactly like Mr. Important does, I see a confluence of a lot of different events. I see generations of Americans that are getting points of view that, let's be frank, have been underrepresented in media for most of my lifetime, like the plight of the Palestinians. I think we would all agree that CNN and the New York Times.
Right, so they pounced on it. We covered that.
And like Adam, you've told me repeatedly that these are some dangerous people that need to be called out. And I agree with your assessment there. But I think you're concluding that the entire movement is broken or corrupt. And I think it's just too far in my assessment.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that we're trying to differentiate. I mean, I know a lot of people don't do this.
Sure.
Me and Adam try to differentiate between, mainstream Democrats
we're
and
different.
liberals and like socialist leftists.
Right, we're different.
Like, these are different groups of people, even though I think very often the mainstream left, unfortunately, gets in bed with them for some.
Now, that's a nice little trick. We separate the left and the Democrats, but, the Democrats are in bed with the left.
Mainstream Democrats and liberals and like socialist leftists. Like, these are different groups of people, even though I think very often the mainstream left, unfortunately, gets in bed with them for some reason. So I'm not trying to say like the entire left in America is broken, and I don't think that's what Adam's trying to say. But where I think it's important to understand is that this is not a one-off. And I understand that, like, I understand how you could see it that way. Either of you could see it that way, because it's like
So they don't care about anti-Semitism. Their only objective is to push this oppressor and oppressed.
lens gets turned on you for the first time, it's like, wait, what the hell's going on here? Or maybe it's easier to not see it when it's not on you. Because, like, one of the comparisons I made, and obviously these are very extremely different in terms of levels of severity, but, the same thought process, the same moral intuitions that kind of went behind a lot of these same people's take on the BLM stuff, like, what you brought up earlier, IRI, is what's manifesting here in the Israel-Hamas situation. Because we saw the same people making excuses for shoplifting. We saw the same people making excuses for rioting and looting, saying,
who are those people?
There are poor people, there are poor black people that are being oppressed by a system, and therefore it's okay for them to go and, destroy private property.
Wait, why was it black? So it was black people that destroyed property. In Portland? Isn't Portland like 92% white? But it was the black people doing it. Do you see the racism?
Because we saw the same people making excuses for shoplifting. We saw the same people making excuses for rioting and looting, saying, there are poor people, there are poor black people that are being oppressed by a system, and therefore it's okay for them to go and, destroy private property, and do all these things that are against the law. And that's essentially the same argument they're making here.
The left says it's fine for black people to do shit because they're oppressed. I mean, that's an all-right talking point.
Saying, well, the Palestinians are poor and they're being oppressed by Israel.
The left has gone too far with this anti-racism thing.
Therefore, they're justified in fighting back. It's the same thought process, just to a more severe degree.
Oof, I see where you're coming from. Don't get me wrong, but I just think that, listen, I was making fun of those people too at the same time for those takes. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I never was like, yeah, shoplifting's based. Like, that's idiotic.
Well, not just shoplifting, but also just this, like, let's not denounce people who are like looting and rioting and doing these things. Mm-hmm. Right? There was a lot of like
riots are the language. Yeah, there you go.
So the language of the oppressed.
Do you hear the agenda? This is about anti-Semitism. Israel, Palestine. Now we're talking about BLM, black people stealing, and the poor white people, they're the victims.
This is an admission, and I think this is a fair criticism of me. I will completely cop
what allows them to individualism ideology. One is collectivism, collectivist. The problem I see is there's two ideologies in conflict here. There's the oppressed.
How many times? What up, Mike? I've got like maybe 30 minutes left if you want. Whatever's up to you. We could do Discord. We could try to do the two people streaming together beta thing that I don't really know how it works. But hold on one second. Here, I'll make this easy. I have a command, but it's not updated. Okay, so yeah, how about give me like maybe even 20 minutes. Okay, so we're back in this Israel-Palestine anti-Semitism conversation. We're back to oppressor and oppressed
ideology, and there's a liberalism individualism ideology. One is collectivism, collectivist by nature, and the other is individualist. And the right, exactly as you're saying, I mean, what allows them to say it's no big deal that Trump is doing this thing, which I admit is terrifying to me as well, is using the oppressor-oppressed lens. They're saying, listen, we're being oppressed by liberals now. We're being oppressed by the left. And therefore, we have to take power by any means necessary because we are the victims. We are in the victim role. And I mean, I'm sure both of you know, this is a lot of the Nazi arguments in favor of the Holocaust, as discussing as it was they were being victimized by the wealthy Jews. So the danger of this ideology is something that I think it's easier if we focus on the fact that it is this ideology and that there are these two things in conflict. Go ahead, Mr. Important.
Well, I want to say I feel bad that Brianna is having such blow.
On the left, because it's not hurting corporations.
A biome. And dark
is hurting communities.
Yeah, look, I definitely.
Okay, now, watch. This is to help show you how they're repeating the language of white supremacy and racism. The question was, are you okay with the fucking theft? No. But then you have material conditions. But you're not allowed to accept there could be mere material conditions.
Don't support shoplifting in any way at all. It seems like a minor inconvenience for me compared to the bigger issue of why people would steal. And even I agree with you that there are mobs of kids that are organized that are shoplifting and taking stuff, and there's even organized gangs and such. And perhaps some progressive DAs have gone too far with lessening the punishment for shoplifting, and that seems to be something that's being discussed in a serious capacity. So I'm all ears for all that stuff. I would never make excuses for shoplifting in a heartbeat, but I'm always looking at why people commit crimes. Why would a bunch of kids get together and shoplift? What's going on with them? Because I wasn't interested in doing that when I was their age. So
correct. That makes sense, Marmot.
I'm just more interested in the why than the what.
Because you gave them an excuse.
Well,
they rob because you said they could rob. They rob because you said they could rob.
I think people are more. I think I give people more credit than that. Than just because you're not going to be punished means you're going to commit a crime. You know, I could probably go push an old lady.
No,
yeah,
but,
like.
Okay, but that's not. Wait, I thought you were saying, Ira, that you shouldn't. You should be spending like the majority of your time rallying the troops instead of calling out like the crazies on your side.
To save time, I'm not going to go back through it. But to them, the left is Hassan, and Hassan is dangerous. Must be stopped.
Well, yeah, because the crazies are just that. They're crazies. And so, why, do you argue with the guy standing in front of Subway pouring a 2-liter on his head, or you just keep moving about it?
If the guy at the corner of Subway pouring a 2-liter on his head has 44,000 live viewers, then yes, right. You should be.
Okay, so in this conversation, they mentioned the right's doing fascism, and the left is what they call being anti-Semitic, according to these folks. And the real danger is Hassan speaks to 40,000 people. But what's not dangerous is Rupert Murdoch, Steve Bannon, the Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society, the GOP, the Daily Wire, TPUSA, AFPAC, Crowder, Rogan, RNC, CPAC, and the entire evangelical movement. Those are not as concerning as Hassan Piker.
Well,
if he's pushing your entire movement, then yeah, you should be.
I mean, I don't see their impact as gigantic. I really don't. Really? When I hear like Hassan, this is something that I just, because if you go out in the real world and you ask people, do you know who Hassan Piker is? 99 out of 100 have no idea. No idea. And I used to do this on Omegle. I would ask people if they know who.
Wow, this doesn't fit their narrative. What will they do?
Hassan is, no idea. And these are just randos on their phones, like going on the internet, messing around. So I think the vast majority of people that are involved in the political process are not influenced by people like Hassan. Now, you guys might disagree with me, but this is what the feeling I get watching the news.
People vote now, though. Don't you think?
No, I think Hassan
watching Hassan are going to go up and vote one day.
One day, but right.
I mean, just squeeze it into that narrative.
Now they're 15 years old and they're 3 years away from being able to vote. You know what I mean?
They're shaping their morality for their entire lives.
Well, I maybe I'm more forgiving, but when I was 15, I thought some stupid things too, and I quickly grew up.
Obviously, like people who feel about it, you're going to run into trouble.
Yeah, like I agree that
there you go.
Internet politics and mainstream politics are not 100% aligned. I mean, we talk about this in terms of Bernie support, Vivek support, Yang support. But I think that's going to change over time because internet politics, I agree, is like still like the young people's game, and the young people are still not the primary voting base.
That's hilarious.
But they will be.
Yeah.
And I think the Hassans of the world and the other political pundits in the world will become just as popular as Fox News or any of these other, or MSNBC or any.
Just think about what he's saying right now. Hassan is dangerous because one day he might be like Fox News. I mean, this is fucking retarded.
Look, we've had conversations like that. We've had these conversations before. So look, I want to bring in something else because you mentioned psychology, Brianna. Do you know about the locus of control, the internal or external locus of control?
Why don't you share it with me? This sounds amazing.
Okay, so look, there's two ways that you can look at life. You can look at life as you have it has an external locus of control over you, that things happen to you that you cannot get past, or you can have an internal locus of control. You feel like you control your destiny. You shape your life to some extent. I do feel like the oppressor-oppressed lens gives people the ability to adopt this external locus of control. Anything that they do is not going to affect their lives. They're powerless under a system of oppression. And I
mean, which one of us isn't out there teaching that to our children? I mean, I know I am.
It could be racism or homophobia, any one of these things. Important that we know what the reality is, because if there is this structural sexism, and I'm just talking about sexism, but it could be racism or homophobia, any one of these things. If there is a certain amount that is insurmountable for the individual to overcome, and in our past there was, obviously women weren't even allowed in certain universities or professions, okay? So that's an insurmountable hurdle for them to overcome. It's important to know that.
Yeah, T minus.
Believe it's an insurmountable hurdle, and it's not an insurmountable hurdle. You're doing yourself a complete disservice.
Right.
Because if the hurdle is insurmountable, you're a fool to try and beat it. You should. The logical course of action.
You CRT. What was he hanging out with Christopher Rufo? Smoking some stogies with Tucker.
Men is basically just increased. Supposedly, now you can look at this. I don't know. There's a massive meta-analysis of this, of like 80 studies or something. But my position on like how to quote fix the problem is that we need to be pushing for a liberal version, a liberalism version of the race blind, gender blind society, where we say, okay, if you're a man or a woman, you can do whatever you want and be whatever you want, and your gender doesn't necessarily control you, and we shouldn't be advocating along the lines of gender or race. And I see like that used to be the left's position broadly. And that right now I see, and this is kind of like the Hassan camp, this is the kind of pro-Palestine Hamas camp, is this moving away from the race, gender blind liberal attitude to the leftist attitude of that stuff doesn't work. Liberalism doesn't work. We all need to align along identity politics and, say, we need to do specific things to make everything better for women at the cost of the male oppressors. And that's where I see like the difference here. I get it. I'm empathetic, so I don't want to like be in that camp. But I guess regarding what you're saying, I'm very untrusting of people's personal experiences. And I know that because we had this whole conversation about the sexism in industries and in the gaming industry specifically. And I believe basically what I said multiple times in that conversation is, I don't know the clear facts on that. I'd have to see data on it. I don't trust what people just say. And I've never done the deep dive into that area myself. So I don't feel like it's productive necessarily for me and you to argue about how much sexism exists in the video game area or these other areas, because as I said, I don't know the answer to the question.
Right.
So that's why I guess I'm trying to focus on like other things of, regardless of how much sexism there is, the psychology of how people perceive this is definitely an issue.
Right.
So
right, I agree.
Determine the actual levels. Look, we wouldn't expect you to believe our assessment of the level of sexism, racism, or homophobia, which do exist, obviously.
Well, it's not even ours. Like, if there are a lot of white people who say, "Oh,
what?" He really brings up race a lot. Black people burning buildings. White Israelis, they're the oppressors. The white people, there's some poor white people out there.
It's not even ours. Like, if there are a lot of white people who say, "Oh, I've experienced tons of racial discrimination in job hiring." I've heard people I know who are like, "Oh, my boss told me that they wouldn't hire me or they wouldn't give me a raise because I'm white and they need a black person or whatever."
Yes. Notoriously, employers are running around violating EEOC.
And does that mean that there's like the entire country is rooted in some sort of racism against white people?
I mean, I don't believe in anecdotal stuff, but also I've heard of white people saying this thing. So isn't that proof that Hassan is bad? One last one. Yo, come on.
Big policy wonks. But, it's kind of like going back to sort of like the importance
what up,
of
Mustang girl?
The bad actors. We saw this on the right where I'm sure.
Well, we believe in everybody's right to be who they want to present themselves as, no matter the size of their hands or not.
You guys have seen this, both of you guys have seen this a lot, which is, I
support Brianna Wu.
Of Republican politicians and a lot of Republican pundits, they don't seem to like Trump, and yet they're afraid to call him out, and they're afraid to call it election denial stuff because they know that the Trump base is like so big, right? And when you don't call out these sorts of things, it seems like it just creates a snowball effect of it getting bigger and bigger until it dominates the movement. And I guess that's what I'm afraid of on the left, is that I know it's not quite there yet, but if there is this kind of attitude of like the left can't get rid of its bigotry, whether it's anti-Semitism or whether it's...
So to sum that up, ready? The right, the Republican Party, Republican states, the media, religious leaders, social media figures, none of them will call out the right. And the danger of that is such. So you need to call out the left. This is just crazy. They don't care about Israel, Palestine. They don't care about anti-Semitism. They don't care about black people. They don't care about all they care about is pushing the narrative that the left is obsessed with race, obsessed with oppressor and oppressed, that the people that looted and burnt buildings during 2020 were black people, and they got away with it because they were oppressed, unlike white people who don't get away with this kind of stuff. And that if the left gets their way, we won't have the continuation of these race-neutral laws. But they didn't call out the right. Brianna mentioned the right. She didn't call out the right. IRI did not talk much through this whole thing. So, yeah, 3 ways to weaponize anti-Semitism. I think IRI came about it authentically. I don't think he's meaning any harm. But when you say that my family as Jewish people, if we don't support what you're saying, then we're probably being anti-Semitic. And also an anti-Semitic preacher who believes in the rapture and supports Israel is not anti-Semitic. And that's a really shitty brush to paint with. Brianna Wu, craven political operative, doesn't care about the plight of anybody except for her own. She's always the victim. Any amount of racism, bigotry, anti-immigration, deaths in the Middle East, any amount of that is to be used for policy. And when people don't agree with you, you're the victim, you're under attack. Lilo and Snitch, they wanted to use dead bodies and anti-Semitism to push the idea that the lefty woke agenda is holding society back, that people do crime because the chances are available, not because of their material conditions. Basically doing a, black people do crime 1350 thing. Bringing race into it over and over and over again. The fear they have about the left is Hassan. That's all they can point to. No real examples of anti-Semitism produced by Lilo and Snitch or Brianna or IRI. So in this, the left is anti-Semitic and it's a little out of hand. No direct anti-Semitism to any of these people, and none of them talked about a specific example where the anti-Semitism is a problem. IRI, I appreciate you doing what you did. The other 3, fuck you. I mean, Brianna Wu is a craven political operative who doesn't have the fucking stones to talk to me. Blocks me on Twitter. Petrified to have a conversation. But this is a thing that is happening. And without addressing the way the conversation is happening, instead of getting distracted by the issue of one state, two state, who did the bomb, who's right, Israel's right or wrong, Palestine's right or wrong, do you condemn Hamas, do you condemn the IDF? You just keep creating these binaries and getting distracted from the fact that they're weaponizing anti-Semitism, which makes anti-Semitism go up. It makes Islamophobic attacks go up. It gives license to people to say, see, I told you the left is the real fucking problem, destroying society with their wanting healthcare and housing as a right and education and, the disgusting renewable energy and all this fake climate bullshit and your virology and science. Always knew your ideology was the problem. And Wu's enabling that for her own craven desires. IRI's enabling it because of a misguided personal attachment to the situation. And these pieces of shit are using it to defend the right, to do a 1350, to stand up for the white oppressor, to stand up for the real victims, the white people being called oppressors. That's a real issue. You gotta be fucking kidding me. These fucking people suck. Yeah, so that wraps up Wu Wednesday. Yeah, I don't know what else. And that's all I have to say about that. I don't see the flaw in the logic I gave for any of that. As a white man who grew up in a somewhat Christian family, I reject the hypothesis as it's oppressing me by not. That's funny. We did an entire history lesson on Wu, and this was how it's being weaponized. Part of it, Wu using the situation for political gain only in a disgusting fashion. What the fuck? Where is it? Oh, I'm stupid. Okay. Let's do this. I mean, the nebulousness of it pisses me off. Call it